Welcome, everyone. Thanks a lot for joining us on yet another edition of Plain Speak podcast. The entire world is only talking about one thing, which is Trump tariffs. Of course, the summits with the Russian president and the Ukrainian president are also ongoing. The ceasefire and the peace negotiations are on. But in all of this, what has affected Indians is the fact that US President Donald Trump has taken a very stark line that secondary tariffs will be imposed on India because of buying of Russian oil. So, in all of this, that India doesn't really directly get involved, but has been affected by the Russia-Ukraine conflict. We still don't know what the resolution to that is going to be, but we are bracing for an eventuality that India-US relationships are not going to be what they used to be, because this is not just the sticking point. There's also the claims over the mediation during Operation Sindoor and so on and so forth. And India-US relationships have really plummeted, quite like what they used to be before 2000. And all of the last 2 decades' work seems to be going downhill. But I'm going to focus on the economics of it. I'm joined today on the podcast with Dhiraj Nayyar, who's an economist formerly with the Niti Aayog. Dhiraj, thanks a lot for making time. Are you worried at all? Are you nervous at all about the situation? 50% tariffs right now, they could go down, but then still could be a pretty high number.
Yeah, I wouldn't say nervous, but I think obviously it's a reason for concern because the US is a very large market. It remains the largest market in the world. Uh, it is estimated that around 45 to 50 billion dollars worth of our exports are going to face 50% tariff. And this is not yet including anything on electronics and pharma, which are exempt for now, but Trump
Could
has
come in
said
again,
that they could come separately. So it's obviously it's a large number, and beyond the large number, I mean there are livelihoods involved. So if you look at some of the things we export to the US, gems and jewelry, or textiles and apparel, or seafood. These are all highly labor-intensive sectors, and they cater to employment for a certain section of the population, and them going out of jobs is not a pleasant thing. So I think beyond that large number and beyond the hit that it'll take on GDP,
Yeah.
which of course we can say it can be 0.5% or 0.6%, doesn't seem a lot, but then
the
there are lives on the
livelihoods.
ground, livelihoods on the ground, and it's because it's a certain segment, as I said, of manufactured goods, of agricultural goods, where employment is very key. So it's a more a worry at the micro level than in
So
terms
much
of growth per se, because I think that we will manage even if we lose 0.5%. From 6.5, you come down to 5.96. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
But
Specific sectors
if those
could take a lot
specific
of it.
sectors go out of business, then it's very difficult to reclaim that business. If Trump, say, or another subsequent US government at some point reduces the tariffs, you lose that market out to your
Somebody
competitor
else.
countries. And at this point, we are pretty much in the highest bracket, right?
Yeah.
With Brazil, I think, and perhaps Syria and a couple of other countries. So all our East Asian competitors are lower, and these are sectors in which they also compete with us. So I think my worry is more about those particular sectors and the livelihoods involved. At a macro level, of course, we'll live with it, and it's not going to even take away the drag of the fastest growing economy. So there's a macro and micro kind of difference.
So, if these tariffs were to stay, let's say, in this high bracket, let's say higher than the other Asian countries, do you feel that a lot of these sectors will have to lay off, will have to cut size of their businesses? That's an eventuality we cannot escape if the tariffs continue.
Yeah, well, I mean, the two options are either we look for other markets, but there's a reason we are exporting to the US. And it is not so easy to suddenly shift to
alternative
alternate markets. And second is if the government then puts in financial support and at least covers some of the margin lost due to tariffs. So I mean, that's possible ways of trying to keep these sectors secure. And that's at 50%, but even at 25%, it's a hit, right? Because again, most of the East Asian countries, if you look at this point in time, are at about
19-20%.
and China is at 30. But then those countries have an additional cost advantage because we are not a very cost competitive economy, especially in manufacturing, logistics costs, power costs, their land costs. A lot of stuff is elevated in India. So, even if you're at 25, we face a competitive problem, but that we can perhaps fight through. At 50, life becomes very difficult for these sectors to adjust.
So, do you think that the only way to kind of counter this in the short term and maybe in the long term is one, of course, you find alternative markets that's going to take the time that they take, but also that the government provides some, sector specific, targeted.
Yes.
What could they be? I mean, is it going to be a dole out? Is it going to be. How do they support
Yeah,
these?
I mean, like during COVID, we did it less in India, but other countries, gave support to keep people in jobs, gave support to private companies, wage support and other things. Of course, in India's context, we have to also worry about, what all we can afford because there's a fiscal deficit there. So, I mean, if we had unlimited money, it would be a no-brainer that, you support.
And other
these
countries
people, right?
did suffer because of all of those COVID bailouts.
And then later they suffered because of high inflation. So there is all of that. But I think again, if it's sector specific, I suspect that if this continues, there will be no option but to give some kind of support, at least to the most labor intensive sectors, say like textiles or agriculture. At least in the short term, while they'll adjust and look for other markets or find ways to reduce their costs. So there'll have to be some kind of adjustment mechanism. Otherwise, you'll see a lot of livelihoods being lost.
So you're saying that the priority of the government could well be that people don't lose jobs. And that would be
Yes.
where they would be focused on.
Of course, yeah. Because anyway, there's a clamor, as you know, in this country for good jobs and higher wages. So we can't really be in a situation where existing jobs are going out when we are faced with the challenge of creating enough new jobs to absorb people. So yeah, that's a challenge.
Any other offsets in the sense, are there any other industries you feel could absorb some of those livelihoods, or those competitive markets or alternative markets in India just don't exist?
No, I mean, some amount may happen, but again, I mean, it's unlikely that we'll be able to sell to the second largest market, which is China, because they are much more competitive than us, and these are not the categories we sell there. I mean, there we sell much more in terms of raw material or pharma. We don't sell too much apparel or, manufactured stuff because, they are more competitive. So you're looking really at Europe, perhaps Japan and a few other East Asian countries which are sizable markets. But Europe is not an easy market either to, get into. So I suspect it'll have to be some kind of adjustment support. And let's not give up on the fact that, in a Trump world, things change. So, and you highlighted all the problems in the India-US relationship, and you're not wrong. But there are always windows and opportunities. When on his way to Alaska, he did say he may consider not putting the secondary tariff on India because he hasn't done it on China. So there are always ways to negotiate and keep that discussion going. So even if you don't have a solution now, within the next 3 to 6 months, you perhaps can come to a better situation, because that much time the government can support, or there are ways to cope for 3 to 6 months. But if you're talking about 3-4 years, then it becomes difficult for the industry to survive, that particular industry, and difficult for the government to cough out that much money to support it in exactly the same way.
So I want to ask you, because I see these comments that actually these tariffs are being paid for by the American buyers and the American public. Can you break this down for our viewers? Why is it that several people feel that these tariffs are actually only hurting America? Does this mean that many of these companies will continue to buy the product that they will buy? Indian manufacturers and sellers will just adjust the product price accordingly. So who really is that a possibility at all?
Yeah. So I mean, what is tariff? It's essentially a tax, right? So if a good is coming in to America for $10, if you put a 50% tariff, it becomes $15, right? So the consumer will have to pay $15. If the tariff was 10%, they would have to pay $11, right? So that's the kind of difference. Now, in a sort of limited tariff situation where it's 10 to 20%, there are margins on both sides, right? So there are retailers there who can adjust a bit of their margin. There are sellers here or manufacturers here who can adjust a bit of their margin and pass on a limited amount to the consumer. But when you come to a 30% or 50% situation, then yes, some amount, I mean, Indian seller can say, we'll give a 15% discount, or an American buyer can say, okay, I'm willing to take a 10% hit. But that still leaves you with about 25, 30 to in the form of tariff in which that American consumer will have to pay higher. So if they can get something cheaper at a better deal from another country, then they will get
They'll
it from the
naturally
other
go for
country,
it,
right?
yeah.
So ultimately, as a consumer, you want the cheapest thing possible. So I think if we can get it down to 25, 20,
Then we
you
are
know,
in
then
a
there's
reasonable
then
space.
then you have some room. I mean, profits may be hit on both sides, but you live to fight another day at least.
But overall, do you feel this is a lasting and very economically sound policy by Donald Trump for America? This whole worldview that he has, that we should have open access, and then nobody should tax us more than we are able to tax them. What do you make of his entire economic policy?
I don't agree with it. I mean, he has his reasons for doing it, but if you look at the greatest period of American prosperity, which is the last, say, 40, 50 years, it's happened with America keeping its markets open. The reason American consumers have been able to increase their purchasing power is because they've got cheap, goods from China, Korea, at an earlier period from Japan. So don't forget that, a cheaper goods which are imported help your consumer, right? The same thing in America would be produced at 2-3 times the price because their wages are so high. So even now, I mean, if I look at it, I can see some strategic sectors like, say, chips, semiconductor chips. And that may make some strategic sense that you want some in America because, if China or tomorrow Korea, something happens, a war happens in Taiwan, there'll be a strategic problem. But I mean, if you're talking about apparel or footwear or seafood or some of the things that will now be taxed higher, tariffed higher, I don't think it makes much sense because I don't think these things will be made in America. And if they are to be made in America, then he has another problem that who will work in those factories?
Yeah. So that's the
then
point
you
that
need
people are
immigration,
raising.
right?
Yeah.
So which also he is not in favor of, right? So I think a certain type of manufacturing will not go back to the US. It doesn't go back. In high tech, sure. I mean, in semiconductor chips or defense, it makes sense that you want your own market to grow and you don't want just importing from others. I think that's something India could also learn.
That's strategic for every country. That's not really so much because
but I
of
think
the
this
business part of
this
it.
random, not random, but I mean this across the board in terms of across all countries and all product categories, I think is the overkill.
That everything has to be made in
So
America.
I mean, yes. So selectively, strategically, there may be rationale. I mean, even though many people would argue there isn't, but you can still make the case. But I think this is too much, and in the even now you may not see that much effect, but it is going to start kicking in.
So this whole "Make America Great Again" by "Make in America Again," all of this could backfire.
And don't forget, I mean, America doesn't make shirts and toys and footwear anymore. But look at tech. Every giant company in the world is American, right? Whether it's Google, your Facebook, your Insta, your YouTube, where you'll put up this podcast, it's all American companies, and they have free access. Not in China, but in India they do. In most of the world they do, right? So it's not. Now, what if every country says we will only have our own platform? We will not use American platforms.
We're getting there, actually.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that's not the way the world has prospered until now. I mean, if everybody looks inside, we'll have a poorer world, and we'll all be worse off. And that's the problem with these kind of policies, because if the US uses it, nothing stops the EU from using it, or India or China. Everybody starts looking in, and then you are in this zero-sum game, where everybody is keeping the other out, and you lose out on the efficiency. So I think I think America, in my view, still is the most powerful and most dynamic economy by far. I mean, if you look at the innovation, China is now doing some, but I mean, most of the cutting edge stuff still comes from the US, whether it's tech, whether it's healthcare, whether it's defense. There's no match. So I think America is not going to be great again by making everything in
America again. But you talked about these tech giants. We recently had from Apple to some other countries kind of really, want to curry favor with Donald Trump. That sent a signal that even some of these big companies that were manufacturing or were diversifying manufacturing outside of America, they've also understood that if they want to survive, that they have to kind of give in to what Trump is doing. Yeah. How did you read into that?
Yeah, but again, I find it extraordinary, because if you look at Apple, the example you took, a lot of the higher value addition that happens in terms of the design and technology still happens in the US, right? What is India doing right now? It's essentially assembling, the various components and exporting it back to the US. So and if you look at, if the value is 100, India may be getting about 10, right? The rest of the value is still accruing to the US. But sure, if Trump can convince US consumers that they should pay
A
twice
premium,
the amount
yeah.
or 3 times the amount for the same iPhone, if the Americans are willing to, buy that, then it can happen, right? If we are willing to pay more for everything. But somehow I don't think the average consumer has that mentality. I mean, national pride is one thing,
Yeah.
but you're also looking at your pocket.
Yes. Yes, so maybe it's about biding time till Trump is in office and kind of not having your businesses take a lot of hit. But I do want to, understand from you. He also wants a lot of big commitments from big companies from other countries to invest in America. Do you think India has scope of kind of offsetting some of his demands by saying, okay, our companies can do this, our companies can do that in America?
Yeah, but you see, we don't have that many companies which are that large. Again, you're talking about maybe 10, 20 companies can do it. Some already do, like the Birla Group, I think, has a aluminium subsidiary there, Novelis. And so there can be investments here and there, but it will not be of the scale simply because we aren't an economy yet, of that scale. And a lot of our big businesses, produce more for the Indian market or in services, banks, for example. So it's not so simple
For India to offer
But
that.
what we can offer, is sort of buying more defense equipment. I think to some extent we're also trying to say we can buy more energy. So there are certain things which we buy from other places in the world where we can make an adjustment and say let's buy from the US.
We were getting there, but now this episode, and
Yeah.
particularly the episode with India and Pakistan, vis-a-vis India, Pakistan has obviously raised alarm bells in Indian diplomatic circles of whether we can ever depend on US when it comes to defense procurement and
Yeah.
other key
Yeah.
strategic procurement. But let's come to the deal then. All of this is also hovering around the deal, the Indo-US trade deal. There, we have our clear red lines, dairy, farming, and I think the PM has made it very clear. Fisheries, dairy, farming, he's saying, I'm not going to make any compromise in that. So where do we go from there?
So I think, on farming and dairy, and this is where we have a genuine fundamental problem because, our agricultural sector is just not competitive enough. It's never been looked at as a globally competitive sector. It's not been touched by reform. I mean, the Modi government tried, it didn't happen.
It didn't happen.
So I think there again, 40% of our workforce still is in agriculture, though only producing 13% or 14% of GDP. But that 40% of workforce is a lot, right? So you can't do anything politically. Forget about the economic logic. It's just not possible to, open them up to, cheap, because don't forget the US and so on also subsidize their agriculture and give various support. So I think agriculture will be tough for any government. So
if that is not happening, then there's not much room to maneuver.
So
right?
I mean, Russian oil is
The only point.
I believe till 2022 we hardly imported any Russian oil, right? It was less than 1% of our oil imports, about 0.5, between 0.2 and 0.5, right? And we imported it, rightly so, because there was a big difference because the West had put a cap on Russian oil at $60. And, it was a discount, so it makes sense to buy cheap, right?
yeah.
The same logic as for any consumer, the government would want to buy cheap. But now I think at the current prices, and again, this is totally pragmatic. I'm not saying this is about surrendering to
Or giving in to
Trump or
US
giving in.
demands.
But the difference is not much now because global oil prices have moderated a lot because Saudis and the others have increased production a lot. So the hit you will take by moving away from Russian oil to other sources of oil, say the pre-22 situation, may be much less in magnitude than the hit exports are going to take. So if
a give has to be.
a give has to be, and you get something for it. I mean, I wouldn't say surrender it without getting something substantial.
But we will not publicly say it. That's the problem. I don't think we will publicly accept that we are willing to cut down our Russian trade.
But I mean, again, it's about making the argument, right? So it's national interest, right? What is national interest? So we were saying we import oil because it's our national oil from Russia because it's our national interest. Now our national interest may be to save certain sectors and certain jobs as well. And because in this case, in the oil case, switching will mean a hit on the government coffers. I don't think it'll make a difference to consumers. Consumer prices are already fairly high. They haven't been adjusted down to reflect the current global price. So government will take a slight hit on its exchequer. But if you don't do anything about the
Then
Trump
it's the
tariffs,
public who's suffering.
and you'll have to give some support there.
Yeah.
So there also there will be an outgo from
It's
the
only
government.
about managing the political
So it's
messaging.
managing, yeah, it's managing. And I think, the great thing, I think we shouldn't get too caught up in this pride and strategic autonomy. I think pragmatism is a great way. And I think that was the way we had positioned our
Russian oil.
purchase of
Yeah.
Russian oil until now. So let's be pragmatic. I mean, if Trump removes the secondary tariff in the next 1 week or at any point, great. But if he doesn't, then let's use it as a bargaining chip, because I don't think there's that much to lose by diversifying
Yeah.
away at this point, and we can say that
It will certainly put the political cat amongst the pigeons, but I think in the longer term, possibly you see this is a pragmatic decision that India could make, because on the deal front, I'm not seeing any
because
avenues
you
available.
can't give on agriculture. On manufacturing as well, there are certain sectors which you'll find it very difficult to, and Trump wants immediate, right? So with the UK free trade area example, they're staggered. So some things are coming down
Yeah.
in now, some after 5 years, some after 10 years, but he wants it right now. He wants the access while he's still president, not in 10 years, right? So, in that kind of situation, it's very difficult for even the government to liberalize, open all industry immediately. So I think our room for maneuver, and that's also national interest, right? Because again, there are jobs and there is contribution to GDP. Auto is a big sector where there's a lot of pressure. So I think, it's a trade negotiations are a pragmatic, you take and you give. So at this point, what can you give? Some adjustment on Russian oil, even if you don't do 100, say that I'm
Do you
stopping
reduce
buying
it?
Russian
Yeah.
oil, you can start reducing it, and if you get a substantial give from the other side. Otherwise, I see the stalemate continuing, and then we hope for the best. At least 50 will come down to 25, and then we learn to live with 25.
Yeah. I only think that with Trump on the other side, and given what he's done with the India-Pakistan ceasefire issue, even if we give a little bit behind closed doors, he's going to come out
Yeah.
and announce it to the world, and, there's no getting away from
So
it.
with Trump, there's nothing behind closed doors. So even if the Russian oil is part of the negotiation, it'll have to be very public, because he wants to claim.
Or it naturally
credit.
comes down and we go
Or-
one day
yeah.
and say, see, they have already come down.
Yeah. So I think, again, the best ways to do these things is not to do it, issue a diktat and say, from tomorrow, no Russian
yeah.
oil. Just stagger it and over a few months, let them see the change in the mix.
Yeah, let the pragmatism set in. But on the issue of our agriculture or for other sectors that could be hit, and where the deal is stuck, several people and economists like yourself also suggest that this is a great time for some liberalization 2.0. But do you see it as that?
I think, in India, we generally tend to reform only when there's some kind of crisis. I wouldn't say this is a crisis of 91 proportion. So I don't think it's a fair comparison to say we are in 1991 now. But I think what we are all hoping for is a 1991 type response, even if the crisis isn't there or isn't as acute. But there is a shake-up happening in the world. And, this is the best time to get your house in order, because, as the PM has said and as everybody is saying, you can't really depend on anybody else in the current circumstances. So reform means what? Reform, beyond the abstract word, again, means making your economy competitive, making your industry competitive, so that at some point in the future, the next time there's a Trump in America or somewhere else in the world, you're in a stronger position to negotiate.
In any case, in the long term, shouldn't that be your goal?
Exactly.
That your industry should be more competitive?
Exactly. In the end, they should be able to compete without
Without
tariff
protectionism.
protection, or even if Trump puts a 20% tariff, we should be able to say we can reduce costs that much. So I think that's a great goal, whether or not Trump exists. But if the Trump induced chaos, nudges us into.
Will it, do you think? Can
Well,
we?
I think after the PM's Independence Day speech, I sense that the government is minded that way. But of course, let's see what can be done. And more importantly, I think we all know what has to be done. The real question is how. How you actually get these things to. In India, the thing is not what, but how.
How? The how is the politics of it, all, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And all the
Because we've tried farm
We've
reform
tried
before, right? And people took to the streets and it had to be withdrawn.
Yeah.
So it's not like we haven't tried, and
Yeah.
to give the government credit for that. So if they want to do it this time, again, they have to manage the politics of it.
Yeah. So if you want to elaborate on the what to do, what would be your top three? Just break it down.
So I think, again, it's very, very simple. I think land is a very big problem. Again, I think after the initial Modi attempt to reverse the
Yeah.
earlier land acquisition law, nothing has happened. So if for manufacturing in particular, land is an issue, the cost of logistics has improved a lot because of the roads and so on,
Highways and all.
but can still be improved. Energy costs for industry in particular, and labor, of course, flexibility. And I think a lot of beyond these big, so-called big policy, are just nuts and bolts, just clearances. Why don't we, like Trump has done in the US for critical sectors, 30 days is the maximum to clear a project. Here we take 900 days, 800 days, 700
Yeah.
days. So I think just speed up the process.
Why can't we? I mean, we've been at it for a while.
Yeah, yeah,
Even this
so-
government has been in power for 11 years. Ease of business
It's
has
a-
been,
It's a very, very long hangover. I think we inherited.
Is it the Babudam issue or?
And I think it's basically it comes from the colonial government, which was made for control. And I think even after independence, perhaps because we were a new country, poor country, that control, the need for control, has always taken precedence in the administrative apparatus. So I think there was a certain amount of reform in 91 in terms of de-licensing and so on. But I think that control mindset still remains. So I think what we need is the government has to be the handmaiden. It's not the main player in economic growth. So I think there's no point blaming bureaucrats or Babu. It's the entire system is designed in that way, and that's the incentives they respond to. So until we seriously rethink that, because it's not that PM Modi has not been keen on ease of doing business. He has. But there's only limited progress. I mean, at least in terms of on the ground, if
Yeah.
you see, things still take far too long compared to our competitor countries. So at least let's bring speed. Let's get ease land. Let's just do 2-3 things. You don't have to, even if you don't want to do the 100 things. Agriculture, for example, I don't think is going to happen, right?
Yeah.
To be honest.
Because of what has happened in
Because
the
of
past.
what just happened 4 years ago. So I don't think anything has changed. And this crisis I don't think can be used there. But it can be used on the industry side.
On the industry side. But tell me about this GST reform that we're now talking about. I mean, that also is a big commitment of the government. It has also been in demand for a very long time. Why that, reform now, and how is that fitting into the picture of everything that we're facing
So
right now?
I think again, I think it's always been the case that we had introduced a GST which was very complex. I mean, the whole purpose of GST or such a tax anywhere in the world is to keep it very simple. Most countries in the world have one rate and a moderate rate, and there may be exemptions, but there's no slabs and no for compliance forms and hundreds, and then petroleum is kept out. How do you get your input tax credit? It's too complicated. Apart from the fact that rates may be high, so I think it's a good realization at this point that you need to bring the slabs down. I hope it's just 0, 5, and 12, and most things which are in current whatever, keep it all 0, 5, 18. I think
Yeah.
is what they're going to do. So what is in 28, bring it to 18. What's in
12 goes to
bring it to
5.
5. It'll boost consumption, I think, which is a good thing given the state of growth, and I think it'll simplify things. So I think eventually, in a country like India, maybe a one rate GST is too much to expect. But if we can go to a 2-rate
Or a
GST,
3-rate
3 including 0, then you've made substantial progress. So I think from what I read from it is that there is a realization that things need to be done.
Yeah. Suddenly there's a sense of urgency,
So I think
right?
as you said, why wasn't it done earlier? Or this has been, as I said, been pending for 8 years since it was introduced. So it's good if this kind of situation is nudging the government and the entire administrative machinery to think about how to simplify things, how to boost growth. Then it's only a good thing.
So you worked in the Niti Aayog. I want to understand from your personal perspective. You have seen the working and the dealings of the Modi government. What would be your insight into how they function, how they think? Most of the time, they do very unexpected things that
Yeah.
nobody saw coming. You want to share your experience of what you figured out of how Narendra Modi makes his decisions or his government?
So I think certain high value decisions which have a very large impact, not value may not be the right word. Those are done generally confidentially, as we know. But on the other hand, say GST, which we've been talking about, that was done with a lot of consensus building and mobilizing states and opposition and so on. So I think it depends on the issue at hand. But I think the good thing is that I think the Prime Minister instinctively, which is not true of a lot of politicians in India, that he instinctively believes in ease of doing business, believes in entrepreneurship. I think partly because he was CM of Gujarat, and Gujarat is probably the most pro-business,
Business state,
pro-entrepreneurship
yeah.
state. So I think his instincts are right and often at odds with the instincts of maybe bureaucrats or who tend to want more control, and he wants more liberal situations. So I think, and that's always I think, and that's probably why the farm laws were introduced or other things were at least tried. Other governments may not have even tried such a thing. So I think it's his instinct, and I think he goes by. He's very much a person who doesn't really go by any great. What texts may say or what economics may say, but I think he's one who believes in what he sees on the ground. So I think a lot
So
of
he has
his
an instinctive understanding
so
of
yeah,
how
so
what the
in
economy
terms of
needs.
even revising welfare or
Yeah.
ease of doing business, I think these are things has seen on the ground, has done himself in his state, and so he wants to do them. But I think it's easier to do it in Gujarat for the simple reason that there's a lot of popular support for these
What the
kind of stuff,
government does,
right?
yes.
And for entrepreneurship and so on. I think in all India level, there are different political economies. There are certain states where there's no entrepreneurship at all. There's no enthusiasm for it or for liberal market reform. There are other states where there is. So I think India becomes a much more complicated place to do business. And I think one idea which was there even at that time, and I think which can be reinvigorated, is use the states. Because I think at the national level, issues get, because of the national media and parliament, they get sort of exaggerated and, targeted much more by, people opposing them. Whereas I think in the states, things may be more doable. So some of the reforms, if the central government can tell at least their state government, the ones which are run by NDA, Chandrababu Naidu is actually doing quite a lot.
Yes.
And if all of their CMs do certain stuff without attracting too much attention and negativity at the center, I think that's one way forward at this point. And I think there was that initial thought of Niti Aayog and so on, was to not dictate to states, which the Planning Commission used to do, but advise states and give them role model laws or role model regulations, which they can implement at their level. So I think if they can reinvigorate that, I think somewhere along the way it's kind of faded a little. But if you can bring that back, I think that's a very good option. Because Delhi can't do everything in such a large country.
Yeah, absolutely. And this, you're right, there's absolutely a lot of focus on anything that the central government will want to do. But we are a federal structure, and sometimes we forget that actually states need to be the drivers of economic growth as
Absolutely.
well. We seem to be fixated with the central government. But finally, tell me, Dhiraj, a lot of people, you referred to the August 15 speech. A lot of people feel that it's time to unleash Modi 2.0 as well. That somehow he had been shackled because of political realities and other things. We were in the general election cycle till last year, and a lot of things were not moving in the direction or with the pace that he had become symbolic of. Do you think we're going to see a
And I
Modi
think,
2.0?
I think we might, now that all of this has happened and after hearing his speech, because I think third terms are a challenge for any government, right? Because there's a certain amount of your core agenda. You've done a lot, but there's so much to be done. And you need that energy, you need that motivation, and not only for the PM, you need it amongst all your ministerial colleagues,
Yeah.
bureaucrats. So I think maybe after the loss of a single party majority, there was a bit of a down mood, and and I think now maybe, ironically enough, the US's moves, which I don't approve of at all, but if they invigorate decision making here, policy thinking here. And once again, we realize that things are in our hand. Let's not be an automatic and let things drift or go along, or let's not be happy with fastest economy at 6.5.
Yeah.
We can be fastest economy at 8.5 also.
Yeah.
So I think if that realization is dawning, and from the PM speech, I got the sense that there is an urgency, which I haven't seen in the last 12 months, which I think augurs well. Now it's for the rest of the system to respond, and there have been meetings and so on, I'm told, subsequently.
Yeah.
So let's see what comes of it.
All right. On that note, thanks a lot for joining us. It is, of course, an uncertain world, but let's see how Narendra Modi steers India and Indian economy out of this. All our eyes are on him and what India does. Not just in context of what Trump is doing, but just generally with the new geopolitical realities all around us. Thanks a lot for watching.